if we use the normal, size barrels that we mostly use, the 59 gallon, it's going to say either 225 or 228 liters on them. So let me go ahead and share my screen. One sec. Okay. Okay, let me just go back a little bit and and I'll show you the images that I had for that. So here's an example that shows you the the logo, the cooperage logo. It shows you Cooper Select, that's sort of their proprietary offering, and then TG as for tight grain. And then they actually spell it out for you here, which is nice. Medium toast, toasted heads. You can also have your own logo, laser etched on it, if you would like. A lot of times they don't charge extra for that. Just depends on the cooperage. And then the year that the barrel was assembled, and then the volume right there. And then in this example, again, you have the logo, you have medium plus for the toast level, you have water bent, toasted heads. The oak came from Pennsylvania. So there's the forest source, and then the air drying time there. And then here we have the forest source again. So the forest was Versailles in this case. And then over here you have the medium slow toast. I guess MD is medium. And then the year of assembly, the air drying time, and the size and the stave thickness there.
So Meredith, you also have a slightly different volume, I think, for Burgundy versus a Bordeaux barrel. Is that right?
Yeah. So as I was saying before, so Bordeaux is 225 liters and Burgundy is 228. So just, not even a gallon difference there, but. And then, so we can move on to storing unless there's any other questions. Okay, so we'll move on to storage. This is something that I pulled from World Cooperage, and I, for the most part, agree with this. So you do want a cool and humid, if possible, environment to store them, and that is so that they don't dry out as quickly and the staves shrink and all that. And if you buy a new barrel, I usually just keep it in the plastic film and all that until I want to use it. I'm not sure if that really helps a lot, but I think it does kind of help the exposure to the dry air. So you'll have less leaks when you go to use it. What I do is I just pretty much pull off the cardboard protection on the head, and I can use my own numbering system for cataloging my barrels, and I'll just write the number that I give it on the barrel head and just put it away till I need it. So, and I write the number that I give it. I write it kind of all like in several different spots on the barrels. So that way, if they're stacked any sort of way on their heads or on their sides, maybe they're kind of like shoved in a corner or something, I can read it and tell which barrel this is and go, okay, that's the one I want to pull out and fill now. So.
Meredith, can I just ask you one question? I know a lot of times they ship them with the plastic around the barrel, but they put cardboard on the heads.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a recommendation about the cardboard? I'm just thinking of the challenges of potential TCA with the cardboard in your cellar.
Oh, yeah, I've never really thought about that before, but yeah, I guess that could be an issue. So usually you can pull the cardboard off pretty easily without taking the plastic wrap off. So like I said, I usually do that for the at least the front head anyway, because I want to put my markings on it. So yeah, that might be a good idea to do. So when you're going to use a new barrel, the first time you use it, this is a good example of what you should do. And usually I find that, yeah, filling it with just a few gallons of water. And then, I don't even use hot water. I just use cold water. And then I put it on its head and leave it there for a couple minutes. And then I flip it over onto the other head and leave it there for a few minutes. And by that time, you can see if there's going to be any leaks. And if it's a new barrel, it's generally going to be from in between staves. You're not really going to have, unless you have a really bad boar beetle problem, but hopefully you don't. You're not really going to see leaks from boar beetles in a new barrel. So once I do that, then I will put it on a barrel cleaning rack and give it a nice good rinse. That way you're also going to notice if there's any leaks on the sides of the barrel as well. Oops. So yeah, if you have a steam generator, that is great, because that's not only going to sanitize it. I mean, they should be sanitized when they come to you, but me personally, like, I like to take a little bit of extra precaution and sanitize it again if I can. But it's also going to fix any leaks, because it's really going to be great for swelling the wood. So I would steam it if you have that ability for a few minutes. Put the bung in the bung hole after you steam it. And what that does is, as it cools, it creates a vacuum inside, and it will pull out any deposits from the wood grain. This is really more important for when you're washing a dirty barrel than with a new barrel. However, be careful with that, because if you leave the bung in there for too long, you can actually have such a heavy vacuum pressure in there that the staves start to bend. And I've actually seen this happen. So it's kind of hard
How
to
about they come with the wooden bungs. What do you do with those?
I just throw those away. Sometimes they come with plastic stoppers, and I just pull those out and throw them away. So yeah, make sure you have enough, silicone bungs to replace them. And then after I steam, I give it, a nice rinse for a few minutes using, very important to use high pressure water. I'm sure most of us are familiar with the tools like gosh, I'm blanking. So just the high pressure tools that are specifically made for washing barrels. You want to use that rather than just like a sprinkler action type rinse. And it's really a good idea to use very hot water if you don't have the ability to steam, because you'll get the sanitizing action as well if you use really hot water between 180 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit for at least a few minutes. That will also sanitize your barrels. And then before filling, allow them to cool down completely, because you don't want to warm up your wine. So repairing leaks, if the leak is coming from a borehole, and sometimes you can really only see that if you shine a flashlight where the leak is coming from. And usually it'll be in the crows You know, that little groove where the head staves meet the bilge staves on the head of the barrel. Or you'll see them underneath a hoop sometimes, and then you have real issues. But if you can get to the borehole, you know, you can just take a wooden dowel and sharpen the end to a point, cut off an inch or so of it, and then hammer it into the hole. And then if that dowel is like sticking out past the end of the barrel, you can trim it again. And that should take care of it. It's really simple and easy and cheap. However, if you know you have a borehole that is under a hoop, you might, if you feel comfortable with it, you might want to remove the hoop yourself and fix it, or you can just call your Cooper rep, and they'll usually take it and fix it for you. If you have leaks from the stave joints, you can usually soak or steam those out within minutes. Sometimes you might need to soak it overnight, so you need to fill the entire barrel with water and leave it overnight. If it's just a really bad leak that won't steam out or won't soak out, just being on the barrel washer. So for used barrels, you basically repeat the same method that you use for new barrels. If it's usually if it's a first racking, it's going to be the dirtiest. So sometimes I have to run the barrel washer for 7 to 10 minutes sometimes, but it's a good idea just to run it until the water runs clear. Again, with the really high pressure barrel washer tool that's made for washing barrels. And if you can't steam beforehand, again, just make sure you use really hot water. If you can steam, I usually will do like a quick rinse first on the barrel washer, and then I'll do a good steaming, and then I'll do a rinse again until the water runs clear. And then also, if you don't have the ability to steam and you want to take a little bit of extra precaution against bacteria and things like that, you can always put it on an ozone generator for a couple of minutes. So run the ozone treated water for just 2 minutes per barrel, and that will take care of it.
So another question for you. I know there's philosophies about how you clean after you empty a barrel. So I've seen in some cases where there's a lot of tartrates because they don't do a full cleaning when they empty them. They do the full cleaning when they fill them.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations if you see a lot of tartrates in your barrel? Do you adjust your cleaning procedure?
So if you have a tool, a barrel washing tool that is made for washing barrels, that should take care of the tartrates, especially if you are combining it with steam and or really hot water. It's very, very rare that I've ever seen a barrel washing tool not be able to handle all the tartrates. So I would recommend just trying to get those out as soon as you can. If you can get the tartrates super clean, you might be okay, because again, it is just tartaric crystals. But if there is wine sort of mixed in with the tartrates, I think that you might possibly run into some issues with contaminating your wine. Oh, and one thing that's kind of obvious, but it bears repeating, is if you're taking a barrel that you had red wine in, you can't put white wine in it. So you can do the opposite. You can go from white wine barrel and you can put red wine in it, but you can't do the other one, or else you're going to have a rosé on your hands. So there's just no way to pull all of that color out of the wood. So yeah, I would really highly recommend getting yourself, if you don't already have one, a barrel washing tool that is made for washing barrels, because the pressure is going to be high enough, and using hot water will just melt all those tartrates away. So storing barrels. I know a lot of people have different methods for this, and I'm going to tell you my favorite, but you can use any of these methods that you want. I mean, the whole point of storing the barrels this way is to prevent any kind of bacteria or mold growth, right? And also, hopefully you're going to keep it from drying out too much and the staves shrinking and having major leakage issues. So you can use sulfur sticks and ozone gas, and really those don't really protect against drying and shrinkage, but they will help prevent nasty bugs from growing. The only problem with those is, you got to use it in a really well ventilated area. And you have to usually repeat the process about once a month or so. So it is a little bit more time consuming method. The method that I was shown at the beginning of my career, and I've used it ever since, is to use strong meta water. So my procedure is I'll fill a 55-gallon drum with water and dissolve a liter container full of citric acid and a liter container full of SO2 powder that I add in at the very last, after it's full and everything, because once you add the SO2, yeah, it gets very noxious. And so make sure to do it outside or just in a really well ventilated area. Just be really careful with the SO2. And then I'll use a bucket and a funnel to pour a few gallons into each barrel. And then you can use a silicone bung to stopper. But if you do that, you have to wrap it. You have to protect it with like saran wrap or something like that, or maybe a Ziploc baggie. And the reason is because that meta water is so strong that it will over time start to disintegrate the silicone bung. I have seen it happen. So and then some people, might use like a Dixie cup, like just one of those little paper Dixie cups, just put it into the bung hole. That works as well. And then that way, after a few months, you can just kind of like maybe do a careful whiff test, just kind of whiff some of the air from the barrel up into your nose, to see if you can still smell the sulfur. And if you can't, then you can replace the water. But for me, I usually only have to do it about every 6 months or so. And it works really well for keeping the barrels hydrated and keeping anything from growing in it as well. Does anybody have any questions about barrel care at all?
Have you ever had a problem with residual SO2 in the barrels, perhaps even showing up as okay?
No, as long as you follow the recommendation that I gave for washing the barrels, you won't have any excess SO2 left over. So
would the rest of the crowd have the same opinion? Again, I've shared with some of you issues I've chased, and still not sure I got to the bottom of a high level of total SO2 coming out in some of my wines. And one of the clues that this group had shared with me was perhaps it could have been something with the barrel cone.
I think if you use a lot of sulfur and then you don't do a really good rinse like she described, I think you can have that residual sulfur in the barrel. So if you needed to, you should maybe do a longer number of minutes if you are concerned, but you would actually be able to smell the sulfur before you did the rinse. And then you could make up your mind about how many minutes of cleaning the barrel you would have to do. But I have actually seen struggling ferments when there's super high amount of sulfur in the barrels prior. So the neutral barrels can be a challenge with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And sulfur really doesn't like hot water. It'll volatilize very quickly the hotter the water is. So yeah, maybe try to make sure that your water is very hot, like close to boiling temperature. If you don't have the ability to use steam. But I've never really noticed any problems with high SO2 in my wines using this method. I still have to usually add some SO2 every month or two to all the wines when I top. So. Okay, so oak alternatives. This is something that I years ago in the beginning of my career never would have touched it with a 10-foot pole. Just the quality just was not there. It just always gave either a very heavy-handed toast to the wines or a very overly woody effect to the wines. But since then, they've gotten the science and the technology down a lot better. And now I'm feeling a lot more comfortable experimenting with oak alternatives. I think it's a great way to renew neutral barrels and, maybe sort of mimic like a barrel fermentation in must, if because doing barrel ferment, it's not for everybody. It's a lot, it's labor intensive. So, and unless you buy the barrels that are specially made for barrel fermentation, then you kind of have to like take the barrel apart yourself to get it in and out of there and all that stuff. So if you don't have the labor, if you don't want to, take the time and trouble to do that, using oak alternatives can help, during fermentation with that. So I'm just kind of going to go over a few of the options that are out there and what they're used for. So with tanks and fermentation bins, you can use oak tannin or liquid, powder or tannin liquid. And you can use it in your musts. You can use it in, if you do tank aged wines, a lot of the bigger but wineries will, sometimes the wines will never see an actual barrel. It'll just stay in tank for the life of it. They work really well as an antioxidant. Like I always use tannin powder in my fermentations. As soon as the grapes are destemmed, I will mix in some tannin powder into the must. It also helps with color fixing and with overall texture and mouthfeel. If you use liquid tannin, just be very careful, especially if you're using it for finishing, because it can be very, when you're doing bench trials, it tastes one way, and then after it's been in the bottle for a while, all of a sudden it can become very pronounced. So just if you're using liquid tannin, it's best to err on the side of a little bit less than you really want to end up with than more. So just be careful with it and be judicious with it. And the nice thing about those two is that they both will totally dissolve and integrate into the wines. So there's no removal that you have to do. Oak powders, obviously they're not really powder. They're more of like like a lot of times they'll be like even bigger than pieces than like sawdust. But you can use these in your must and tank aged wines to add, texture, mimic barrel fermentation. I've heard that using untoasted oak, if you're afraid that you might have some smoke taint, can sort of help mask the smoke taint. You can use lighter toasts to highlight the fruit. And again, oak is always going to be a great antioxidant for the wine as well. And the great thing about the powders is you can they come usually with mesh bags that you can put it into. So sort of like a tea bag, you can steep it in your tank or your bin, and you can just take it out whenever you want. So it's kind of versatile that way. Oak chips. Now we're getting a little bit, we're going to go up in size here. So oak chips, basically the same as the oak powder. You can put it in mesh bags and steep it in the must or the wine. Or you don't even have to use a mesh bag with these, with the chips. You can just, and also the powder too, you can just put it straight into the must. And if you're going to, as long as you're going to press that wine, it can go into the press along with the must and be pressed out. The cubes and stavettes, and sometimes they come in other shapes as well, depending on the cooperage. Same thing, you can put them in mesh bags and soak them in the tanks or the bins. The only thing is with the cubes, you have to be a little careful because if the way that they're cut, on two ends, you're going to have exposed oak grain, and that can add more of like a woody character to the wine. So a lot of people kind of will shy away from oak cubes because of that. So just, be aware of that, and realize that because it's such a high ratio to the whole surface area of the cube, that could be an issue. And now we have sticks and fans. These can go directly into your vessel, whether it's a tank or a bin. And they're a little more versatile too, because most of the cooperages will allow you to mix and match if, say, you want different toast levels for complexity, or you want American and French in the same fan. You can do that as well. And the great thing about them is that, you can just take them out anytime you want. So the inner staves for the tanks, they're going to be your most pricey option, and they're kind of semi-permanent. So you can have them installed, as you can see in the picture, around the inside walls of the tank. And this can help you get some oak integration into your wines if you don't want to use barrels. Usually it's the bigger operation wineries that use them because they are expensive, and then they need to be swapped out every so often as well. So
I would just add that it's a lot of oak. So what I did when I worked for Gallo was we actually would do maybe less than a week for the first use. So maybe do Chardonnay for a week and then come off of it and then put a second wine in, because it's so much oak. They usually sell it like at 100% new or something. So you might want to either calculate using a smaller dose so you don't have that intensity, or think about using maybe in sequence like 2 or 3 different wines, that way you can use it for several months, but you don't like have all that oak happening with one wine. And I usually do grams per liter to calculate it, because every source uses a different way of selling it. So some do it by some kind of measurement of the volume, and some use it by weight, and it's really hard to compare one vendor to another. So I just always calculate grams per liter of weight of wood as a way to, at least I understand that volume in my head.
Yeah, and did you find that it was that these inner staves for the tanks were harder to clean?
Well, I like the ones where they do the fans and they zip tie them together.
Okay.
And then I hang them from hooks inside the tank, because the other thing is they float. So you really need to figure out a way to keep them submerged in the tanks. But I do agree, when they're in there in that permanent way in your photo, they're very hard to clean.
Yeah, and I personally I've never used oak alternatives in tank. I've really only used it in must or in barrels, so I don't have experience.
Okay, so I've actually mimicked a barrel fermented Chardonnay by using these kind of staves, and then I put like a snake that's connected to the bottom valve, and then you come out of the rack through the bottom, and the snake kind of slithers around in the bottom, but it's kind of a way to do surly while you have the oak in the tank. So you could do like a 10,000 gallons of Chardonnay juice and mimic a barrel fermentation.
Okay.
But the key is for the snake, you have to weigh it down with something like bungs or something, or else it floats. So if you keep it on the bottom of the tank, it'll just kind of move the leaves around.
Okay.
Mhm.
Interesting. Yeah, this is, I mean, this is one of the cool things to me about oak alternatives and all the different ways that they come, is you can just get so creative with it. So all right, so going to barrel use, again, you can use tannin powder or liquid tannin. You can, there are liquid tannins and tannin powders that are specially made for fermentation stage, for aging stage, and for finishing stage. So just make sure that you're getting the right one for your use of it. And then the oak balls and cube in a tube. So as far as I know, the only cooperage that makes oak balls is Extra Shen. And you can get them in American and French. You can get them in 3 or 4 different toast levels. I personally didn't find that they were my favorite as far as what they imparted to the wine, but that's just me. But I did love the fact that I could just drop them right into the bunghole. And then when I emptied the barrel and went to wash it, you just turn the barrel over and they just fall out of the bunghole. So that's kind of cool. And I also like that they try to solve that problem with the end grains being exposed by making them into balls, so you don't have as much woody character in the wine from that. And then cube in a tube, that's something that I think it's Oak Alternatives does. So, they put the cubes, if you want to go that route, into a mesh tube, and then you can just put that right through the bunghole. And the great thing with that is that you can just remove it anytime you want. So, occasionally go through and taste what it's doing to the wine, and when you think it's done enough, you can just pull it out. And I think with the balls, you can't really do that because they don't come in a tube. So you kind of have to leave them in there. But they're usually made to mimic what it would be like to keep your wine for, a year or 2 years in a new oak barrel. So they're specially made to be left in there, and you get the same effect. And again, you can usually mix, request to mix toast levels or mix forest source if you want. Oak on a rope, those are kind of the ones that I like the best to use, because again, I like the versatility of it. I like that I can choose 2 or 3 different types of oak alternative and have them made into one chain, and put that into a barrel. Another thing you can do is just have one particular type that you like in one barrel, and have a different one in another barrel of that same lot. And again, it's like there's so much more versatility that you can do if rather than just using barrels. Barrel inserts, I have used those before as well. They were kind of in the winery when I got there, kind of a thing. It's not something I personally would have chosen, but those can be good too. But again, it's not the most versatile choice. And it does make it harder to clean, to get them totally clean when you use barrel inserts. But
my favorite
an
description is like an apartment complex for lees.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
can see
really
that.
hard.
Yeah. I mean, these days, I think they try to install them sort of like up against the inside of the head if they can, or up against the inside of the body. But in the old days, they used to just take the head off and stick it in there and put the head back on. And so it was kind of like in the middle of the barrel. So that made it a little harder to, like get a racking wand in there or something, or get the barrel washing tool in there. So it is a semi-permanent option, and one that doesn't have as much versatility. So does anybody have any questions with the oak alternatives and the types and their uses? All right, we'll move on. So this is not an exhaustive list, but this is just, some examples of cooperages that offer oak alternatives. And so when Julie shares the PowerPoint with you guys, I did link all of these logos to their websites if you want to do some more exploring. So if you do want to, play around with oak alternatives, it's always a great idea to do a bench trial with anything that you're going to add to your wine, right? So if you want to do it with oak alternatives, you can go to the different websites. Some of them have where you can just order the sample kits right there. Sometimes you have to call your rep or call the cooperage and request it, but they'll usually send you a kit with several different little pieces of oak in several different toast levels and offerings that they make. Oh, and again, I should mention, in the old days, the alternatives are usually always like fire toasted. That's why they were a problem, or they were, made from cast off pieces of oak that weren't the best. And I think they've come a long way with the quality of the oak that they use, and they now do a lot of convection toasting, and so it's not all heavy-handed, like one size fits all type of toasting that they do anymore. And you can usually get them in American French, and I believe it's Quercus that offers Hungarian even. So if you want to do Hungarian, you can go there. Once you get your kit, they'll usually come with like a little instruction. Sometimes they don't. But usually they do, and it usually involves filling a bunch of 750 milliliter sample bottles with the wines that you want to work with, and then putting the little oak pieces into the bottle. And usually it'll say soak for 7 to 14 days. Well, I recommend cutting that in half. Whatever it says, cut that in half, because that way, it's often too much oak exposure with those little pieces they give you. And if you cut it in half, then you can sort of get like a subtle idea of what the alternative is going to do to your wine. And if you want to leave it longer, after tasting it for half the time, you can. So I think you get the best effect when you just sort of cut that specified time in half. And then, you might want to, when I did this last year, for example, I invited everyone on the staff. I said, I'm going to set out 25, 30 samples this particular day. If you want to come in anytime that day and taste and make your own notes, feel free to do so. And that way I got the opinions of several different people, and it made it easier to sort of narrow down which alternatives I wanted to try. So, it's a good idea to sort of take some notes, write down what you're looking for with the wines, whether you like or don't like what one of them is doing to the wine, the characteristics you're getting from it. And then you can take that information, and if it's still really hard to like put it together and make some decisions, you can contact the rep from the cooperage and have them either, maybe they'll even come out and taste with you, or just sort of put together the puzzle pieces and figure out what would be the best options for you for what you're going for. So, any questions on bench trials for oak alternatives?
I would just say that when I'm using them, I always switch to like 25 or 30% new, and they always want to give you like 100% new in their suggestion on dosage rate. So like when you're doing that trial, for example, maybe you don't actually use all the pieces of wood they gave you for that 750 ml bottle, because it just feels like you're not going to like it and it's going to be overwhelming. So I like to just bring that dosage rate down, so you get the same effect as you're saying with the less number of days.
Yeah, the only concern I would have with that is that I don't know if you've noticed, but sometimes they'll usually give you like 2 pieces of oak. That's pretty standard. And one of the pieces will be a different, you can tell just by looking at it, this is like a different toast level or different, it got a different treatment than the other piece. And so I assume that they're meant to be put together to get the total effect.
Mm-hmm. So maybe in that case, you could just, if you're going to get 100% new in that bottle sample, you might just want to dilute it with some of the wine that you use for the trial, and make like a 50% solution or a 30% solution, just because the amount of oak they want to sell you is most likely not the amount of oak you want to use in their winery.
Yeah, they usually have calculators as well on their websites, or maybe the rep can give you what they recommend. And again, just like Julie's saying, you can take that with a grain of salt and maybe try a little less. Sometimes you can request the chains to be a little shorter or a little longer. And it also kind of depends on how long you want to keep it in the wine too. So some cooperages will sell the oak on a ropes that are meant to be in there for, I don't know, like 6 months or so. And then they have ones that are meant to be in there for a year, and so on and so on. But yeah, don't be afraid to experiment because you can always add more oak, but it's really hard to take away if you get too much. So yeah, so if there's no other questions, that's pretty much all I got.
Well, thank you, Meredith, and thanks for surviving our technical difficulties.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to update everybody that I will be sending out a link to this. It will be on the WQA website as well. And I know that I'm talking to other people about giving talks coming up this summer. But if you have a topic that you want to cover, I'm happy to have members of our group actually do presentation like Meredith did. So thank you, Meredith, for doing that. And yeah, if you have questions and you don't think of them now, but you think of them later today or whatever, you can contact me or you can contact Meredith as well. And you're going to make the slides available for people as well. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I send out the link, I will also send out her slides so you can take a look at those and let us know if you have any questions. Well, if nobody has any questions for her, then I just want to say thank you, and we will see you soon.
So you guys have a good afternoon. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.